Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again. So the festive season is fast approaching us, and if you're anything like me, you're already looking to give a wink-wink and a nudge-nudge to some family members for potential gifts that you may wish to unwrap on the 25th of December. So I thought it'd be prudent to put together a little recommended Bond reading list for this particular season, for those of you who are looking to get a Bond gift for someone else, or even looking to, drop strong hints yourself. So I thought first off, like Bond books, Ian Fleming, he was kind of a big deal. So this is the next installment in the Folio Society's Ian Fleming Bond collection. They've done Live and Let Die this time, and so the Folio Society is a really high-end brand for books. The Ian Fleming books all come in these lovely, slipcases, and the books are really high quality, and they have several illustrations throughout. So it is a very high-end gift. This is Live and Let Die, and I'm talking about this one because it's the latest one, but there are, like I say, 7 others. And if you're looking to buy, first of all, a classic, obviously it's Ian Fleming's Live and Let Die, but for me, they're really good, display pieces, and I just kind of flick through them for reference. They're gonna not be leaving my home, I want to take really good care of these, but they are quite excellent gifts. Up next we have a book that I've covered on the channel before, Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan by Mark O'Connell. Like I said, I've talked about this book on the channel before, and now I know Mark O'Connell, I'm happy to say he's a friend of mine, and this book is basically him running through his life in relation to Bond and the Bond series. He has more of an in to the series than I think most of us had. His granddad was a chauffeur for Cubby Broccoli, Eon Productions, so he had a bit of a closer reach of the series than I think most of us have, but it's not to say that this isn't relatable. I think that any Bond fan can relate to this. He just talks about, how his first experience seeing the films, what he thought of them then, what he thinks of them now, all this kind of stuff, and it just kind of goes along with his life story as well, which is really interesting and funny and witty, and it's a really great read. I would be surprised if there is any Bond fan out there that can't relate to what is in that book in some way. And once again, another book, co-authored by, I've not met both of these guys, Matthew Field and AJ Chowdhury, but AJ Chowdhury I've met several times this year, happy to call him a friend as well, and he's the co-author of Some Kind of Hero, the remarkable story of the James Bond films. This is I made a review video of this as well, look, it's massive. It is really, I think in the video I referred to it as a Bible for the production history of the James Bond series, and I said that to AJ, and he was he sort of said that he doesn't really like when people refer to it as a Bible, because he was saying there is so much information that is left out. A true Bible would be 4 times as big as this. But seriously, if you're as big a geek for all the behind the scenes stuff and the making ofs that I am, and I think I said this in my review, the thing that I really got the most out of in this is kind of when they talk about the Pierce Brosnan films, because those are such a that's an era of Bond without much in the way of retrospective, on the Blu-rays and the DVDs there's all these great making-ofs and commentaries and such, and I feel like the Brosnan films are underrepresented when it comes to looking back, 20 years on at them. A lot of the featurettes on those Blu-rays are kind of from the time of the production, so they have a bit more of a promotional feel to them. I mean, the back describes it as the first biography of the making of the James Bond films, and that's kind of a perfect way to describe it. It is a proper biography of the making of this series. Okay, so we're on to the new stuff now, and the first one I have is The Many Lives of James Bond, How the Creators of 007 Have Decoded the Super Spy by Mark Edlitz. This is a collection of interviews with people with a very close relation to James Bond in many instances, and it's a really good, eclectic bunch of people. So, for example, they have, some, really high-profile people, Martin Campbell is here, John Glenn, Don Black, Anthony Horowitz, Roger Moore is in here. And obviously those people, talk about their corresponding films and, their relation to the series and all that kind of stuff. But then there are some interviews that go just a bit deeper for, proper sort of geeks like me get a big kick out of. So he interviews Bruce Firestein, who of course was one of the co-writers for GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies, but also wrote a couple of James Bond video games. And that was the stuff that I really got a kick out of. And also, he also interviews some of the guys who voiced Bond in the video games, and that is so cool because that is something that the James Bond video games are just an era of Bondom, an area of Bondom that I feel is so underrepresented in terms of, you know, making of and retrospectives, all that kind of stuff, so I got a real kick out of that. Like I say, this is a very new one, but it's going to be sitting proudly on my shelf and be a source of referencing for me for quite some time, particularly, like I say, when it comes to those video game, you know, they go into such detail, it's really cool, and it's just a nice overview. It's very eclectic in, like, who they talk to, like, costumes, and then some academics come in with perspectives. It's just kind of a great all-rounder when it comes to sort of knowing a bit more about the history and behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff, so very much recommended. And last but by no means least, we have The World of Bond According to Smersh Pod by John Rain. So I don't actually have a physical copy of this book, I read it as an ebook on my commute, and it's a very different one to, I think, it's more of a comedy book than the books that I've talked about so far. I'm sure if you're watching this channel, you probably already know John Rain from Twitter, Mr. Ken Shabby, and his podcast, Smersh Pod, in which he looks at, not exclusively Bond movies, but obviously Smersh Pod, you know, he talks a lot about Bond, and the podcasts are always, he has some great interviews on there, they're really witty, informative, and the book is exactly the same. I mean, this is kind of like exactly my cup of tea. I just kind of like reading other people's reactions to Bond films, and the comedy bits that he interjects here and there are really good. So like I say, the book is more of a comedy book than I think the other ones that I've talked about, so it's not so much like behind the scenes trivia, that kind of thing. It is just really funny. John kind of runs down the films, like, narratively, kind of like how I do on this channel, you know, you sort of like talk about the scenes in the film and then just, like, you know, interject your observations and comedy bits here and there, but it's really, like, this actually had me giggling on my commute. It's just some really funny and sort of just, like, interesting observations. Like, John's, like, a really funny guy. Like, I follow him on Twitter, he's such a funny guy anyway, so I kind of, my expectations were already quite high when I was, before I read this, and then as I was reading it, I was just, like, giggling away on the tube. It's really cool. I think one of the other things that's really great about it is that you really can get that John is such a passionate and enthusiastic Bond fan, and even though he might sort of, like, you know, poke fun at it a little bit here and there, I mean, you know, we as Bond fans have to accept that not everything in this film series is, you know, criticism-free, let's say, but it comes from such a loving place that it's really nice and sweet and very, very funny. So there we go, Bond fans. Those are some of my very top picks for the festive season. So if you're looking to add any more Bond items onto your gift lists, then I would highly recommend any of the books that I've talked about in this video. In the meantime, please do head over to my Facebook and Twitter pages and my Patreon page as well if you want to go one step further in supporting this channel. And until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.